welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Graham Beecroft. Now, Graham is a fascinating individual for lots of different reasons, and is also actually my third cousin, my mum's second cousin. But he was a former quantity surveyor, turned sports editor and presenter. He worked at the BBC Radio Merseyside, Radio City, and does a lot of freelance reporting on Sky Sports, Talk Sport, presented ITV Sports on the panel show, and also now contributes to LFC TV, radio sports broadcasting and lectures at Liverpool St John Moores University. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Thanks very much, Leila. What an intro.
Well, I hope I managed to get everything in there. I certainly didn't want to be told off by Mum, who might say, you haven't included everything there and all of his accolades. But thank you ever so much for being here on the show today. It's it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and for you to be chatting to me really about your epic career, not only within sports but also how you managed to go from quantity surveyor through to being on some of the most well-known radio broadcast shows in the UK. And I guess for those that perhaps don't know you as well as I do, I wonder whether you could give us a very kind of a brief synopsis of how you did come to be where you are today, Graham.
When in the days when I left school, I'll tell you what my first job was, which was actually working for Lever Brothers in Port Sunlight. And Unilever is a massive organisation which makes lots of things, soap, detergents, etc., etc. Huge organisation. And I didn't know what I wanted to do really when I left school. So I wandered down from my house to the front gate of Lever Brothers Port Sunlight, looked up at a notice board which said vacancies, and there on the vacancies board was something which was inviting applicants for the tactical planning unit. And I thought, tactical planning unit, this sounds really good. I'll have a go at that. So I applied and got the job. It turned out that the tactical planning unit this was when Lever Brothers factory in Port Sunlight was really a huge place. It's not so big now, but their research is there, and it's still a really big and important employer. But anyway, this was when they were manufacturing soap and all sorts of things down at Lever Brothers in Port Sunlight. And basically, to cut a long story short, it meant that you had to calculate for production how much space there was for storing things, how many fibrites, which are the cases that soap are packed in, need to come in to meet production, etc. So it's that kind of tactical planning to make sure everything went very, very smoothly indeed. So that was my first job, but I didn't enjoy my boss as much as anything, to be frank with you. And I thought, what else can I do? So I opened the Liverpool Echo, looked through a quantity survey. Now, I was lousy with maths at school, I have to be honest with you. It wasn't one of my greatest subjects. Nonetheless, I applied, got the job, and again, to cut a long story short, I really enjoyed it, actually. It was great, especially because we were, working with important jobs, a lot of them for Liverpool City Council. And then I moved on to a private company, which was a company called Renco, which I really enjoyed working at. That was up in Maghull in Liverpool, those people who don't know. It's further up what was then the Lancashire coast, now the Merseyside coast. And they were a civil engineering company. Built roads and all that kind of thing, and I really enjoyed it there. I had a really enjoyable time there, and a really enjoyable job. Got on with the lads on the site, which was great. You could get out in the open air. But all this time, I was writing a little column for the local newspaper, which, again, to cut a long story short, developed into me working for Radio Merseyside on a non-payable basis. On their Sunday football program, and I did more and more and more. Got a really good break there, by the way, in the first instance, because all the things were off, all the matches were off because of snow, and I was the press secretary of the Birkenhead Sunday League by this time as well. The chap who ran the show got in touch with me. Any games on at all we can do, desperate for something to do. So I said, yeah, come with me. I said, it'll be a rubbish game. But I said, he said, don't worry about that. And off we went. And that gentleman, whose name was Brian McAvoy, then used me more and more in this Sunday program, doing voice pieces over the telephone. And eventually, because I was doing that, at the same time, obviously, I was doing my other job. This was only a weekend thing, which I did. A job came up, and full-time job, and I was asked to apply for it at Radio Merseyside and got the job. So I got a reporter's job at Radio Merseyside. So the choice was then whether to stick with where I was, because there was a possibility of the directorship coming up, or whether I should go and do what I really wanted to do, which was go out and report on football matches. And I thought, well, in for a penny, in for a penny. If it doesn't work for me, I can always go back to quantity surveying. So I decided to take that job and moved on from there. And it was a real fluke, really, Leila.
I love it. That's such a great story. Such a great story. Because I think, especially within media and TV presenting, radio presenting, things like this, people often desire to be in that world, but don't know how to get into it. It is something that is, it's almost an unknown. And I think you do have to have, those glimmers of kind of talent and genuine passion, which you do clearly. And I've listened to a lot of your presenting shows and various pieces on the internet, which is just absolutely fantastic. And a couple of key pieces that I did want to kind of ask you about, were, I suppose, not only how has the world of sport from your lens kind of really evolved and changed over the last couple of decades, but also I know that you have two daughters, and you mentioned there has been a rise in the number of kind of female presenters in sports and players as well, which is fantastic. What is your take on that?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's absolutely brilliant, because, I was always keen when my daughters were growing up to say, do sport, because I played a lot of sport when I was young, did a lot of swimming as well. It was actually a place called Port Sunlight Baths, and me and my friends used to go down there, had a contract, and even in it was closed in the midwinter, but even in the times like, April, when it was just opening up again, it was connected to Lever Brothers, actually. But you didn't have to be a Lever Brothers employee to go there. So, but the bath was heated. It was an outdoor bath which was heated. So me and my friends used to go down there, and without really knowing it, and having a lot of fun and everything else, we were developing our strength and swimming skills. And I used to play football when I was a youngster. I used to really enjoy it, and I always said to the girls, play sport, because what you do in your early life will lead to hopefully a fit and healthy life later on. And if you don't do anything, believe you me, you'll regret it. And anyway, one of them took my advice, and was good enough to trial for Merseyside school's netball team, and played for a school netball team. And the other didn't quite take to it so much, but she's grown up as a really nice girl as well. And I think she regrets a little bit, to be honest with you. She didn't do more sport when she was young. But my advice there has always been to encourage your children, girl, boy, to go out and do sport, because it keeps you off the street corners. It gives you something to take an interest in, and it gives you the basis for, I think, good health for the rest of your life, unless you're very unlucky.
I absolutely concur. I think sport, and certainly given the present times, sport, health and wellness, whilst it is perhaps slightly more difficult to be able to be watching live sport, actually keeping healthy and well and being engaged in something that encourages good health and mental health, I should say rather, is absolutely what we need right now. And there's many analogies from sport and from business, and how those two worlds almost collide together in a positive way, because the competitive nature, the resilience required, and the stamina required to be good when it comes to sports is absolutely key in business as well.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point about the mental side of things as well. I mean, I'm no geeky computer games individual, and I don't decry it at all, by the way. I think if you're in a certain environment, and enjoy doing that, then mentally you can be pretty fit with that. But I always think if you can get outside in the open air, in the fresh air, and go and kick a ball around the field or whatever it might be, whatever you might get some enjoyment out of, the feeling of doing something different away from your normal environment within four walls is a really good way to, and again, might be unbeknown to you really, but without really knowing it, you're actually building something which is going to stay with you for the rest of your life. And what better in the times that we've just had to go outdoors and be able to walk the countryside, and hopefully as we're recording this that will happen to everybody fairly soon. But it's a great environment to get out and just walk the hills or walk down a local footpath or go somewhere where you haven't been, and the number of people who are doing that now is interesting, and I'm sure getting the benefit of it.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more, and fingers crossed we have light at the end of the tunnel very, very soon indeed. And Graham, I'm going to move into kind of asking you about football, which I know is your main passion, and Mum tells me as well, Graham or Beaky, always incredibly passionate about football. Now, you've been present for many fantastic moments within football, but also some which have been ever more challenging, I would say, and described, I suppose, as kind of big tragedies in the world of football. The Heysel in Belgium, I believe, at the European Cup final, but then also the Hillsborough disasters. And I wondered, on this note, whilst football is seen and perceived, and again, I am absolutely no football expert, but almost in quite a tribal way, how have some of the disasters that you've been present at really allowed the communities to actually come together and become more inclusive?
It's an interesting one. That Heysel was a little bit different. I mean, Heysel was, that really badly affected me, because I'll never forget going to the stadium the following. I mean, I was reporting when the whole thing was unfolding, in front of me. But I'll never forget going to the stadium the next day, and I was near Sir John Smith, who was the chairman of Liverpool Football Club, and Peter Robinson, who was the secretary stroke chief executive of the football club, and seeing the tangled mass of crushed barriers in front of me, and that really will always stay with me. From that point of view, it was a little bit awkward. I mean, both sets of supporters blamed the other, and there was the tribalism was there. Hillsborough was different, because Hillsborough, although a lot of people around the rest of the country didn't believe it at the time, people on Merseyside knew what had happened there, knew exactly what was happening. And fortunately, it took a long fight for the real truth of that to come out. But Liverpool and Everton fans who've always been quite close. It's a little bit different now, but they've always been, quite close, because in the Merseyside area, families are Everton supporters or Liverpool supporters, or quite a lot of times both. So there isn't that tribalism or that nasty aspect of tribalism, if you like, which can lead to problems in football. But the two clubs and their supporters really came together strongly after that, because the whole of Merseyside was affected by what had been said and what had been written in the newspapers. And everybody will know that one newspaper in particular, The Sun, is hardly read on Merseyside. They hardly sell a copy of the newspaper because of what was written about Liverpool supporters post the Hillsborough disaster. And sadly, it always takes something like this for things to change. And it changed the face of football, because from being standing and seated watching a football match, stadiums now are all-seater in this country. In the top flight, you have to have an all-seater stadium, and that has helped young children and I think female supporters to go along and watch football in a much safer environment. And it's great to see the men and women going to football matches and enjoying it just the same. When Liverpool won the European Cup a year ago, I was lucky enough to be on the press coach, which was in front of the team coach going around the city. Now, I'm lucky enough to have been seeing Liverpool and Everton for a long time, winning trophies and going on these tours around the city. But what was significant was the different ethnicity of the people who were cheering and watching that. And that was a really significant factor, I thought, in what was going on. And also men, women, girls, boys also watching it. And that was fantastic. And it was the greatest celebration that I've been on. And I've been on some fantastic ones, but that beat them all. It was a wonderful day.
That is so wonderful to hear. Obviously, absolutely terrible tragedies that you've experienced, but I think ultimately, and also given the present time in the world, in the modern world that we are living in, where we can take the best parts of learning from things like this, and actually goodness can come out of the other end. And certainly, I see and speak with, and have even had on the podcast show as well, many really inspiring female leaders who have been athletes in the world of football and even boxing. Stacey Copeland, who I mentioned to you previously, was a previous football player for women's football in the UK, and now holds the Commonwealth title for boxing. Things like that weren't happening a couple of decades ago. So actually, you see that whilst there's been lots of terrible things happening, the journey seems to be on a nice upward slant.
Yeah, it has, women's football has always existed. And if you go back, you know, 4, 5, even more decades than that, women's football was watched by quite a lot of people, at one time or other. And then for some reason or other, wasn't perhaps as, in my mind, and perhaps in the perception of most people, wasn't as much in people's conscience, certainly as it is now, with professionalism having come into the game, which is great to see. And also, it gives a chance for people to go out and try another sport, because there are a lot of talented players who could only play football by having a kick around with their friends. But now women, girls can go and play football on an organised basis. And one of my grandchildren went along and tried football, and she hasn't kept it up, unfortunately, but she went and tried the sport, and it was there for her to try. And that would have never been the case a few years ago. Boxing, of course, as you reminded me a little bit earlier on, was banned for women. They weren't allowed to do it, and I think that was for the reason that people felt that they didn't want to see, girls bashing each other up, that it wasn't the sort of thing that again, in most people's perception, they would want to see. But girls came in, took up the sport, and on a level playing field, of course, with other girls and with the weight divisions all the same, showed that they're quite capable of doing without getting knocked about too much. And I think that the care that is now taken in boxing in terms of the health of athletes has helped that as well. But there it is. If you want to go out and do it, you can do it. Of course, Taekwondo, we're Olympic champions. There's an Olympic champion over in Liverpool. There's one in Flint in North Wales, which isn't too far away from where I live as well. So, that's a great sport to get involved in. And perhaps sports that girls, women wouldn't have said, that sport's for me, are now wide open to them. And that's fantastic to see.
I absolutely agree. And whether they do or don't want to do it, what is really wonderful is that everyone appears to be far more included than they once perhaps were. And again, I know, there are age-old traditions of this being kind of predominantly, everyone knows football and other sports as men's sports, but the fact that there is options now, I think is absolutely excellent. And I know that you're a massive fan of kind of giving back to the youth, and you do a lot of lecturing at the university, which is brilliant. But it's very much, the next generations of leaders, of athletes and such like, having the opportunity to do and, follow whichever passions they may possibly have.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, these days there are a lot of female football supporters. A lot of football supporters from ethnic minorities, as we might say, and they do really well. I think a lot of people would be thinking, well, this is only a sort of box ticking exercise if they saw somebody doing the job, excuse me, that they weren't previously used to seeing. But you listen now to the people who are on the television. They know what they're talking about. People, if people, can believe in somebody, there isn't any point, putting somebody in a position where they're uncomfortable, where the job is difficult for them. But people now see girls, ladies on the television, and they see them and hear them, and they think, this girl knows what she's talking about. She's, clearly somebody who knows what the game is all about, etc. And that's fantastic. And I think that's really good. And that applies, right across things, men, women, and again, as I said before, people of different ethnicity as well.
You make some really valid points there, and I think customer base and fans and things like this, and I think this is also prevalent in many other sports as well, because actually the customer base is incredibly wide and varied, and for sporting clubs, Liverpool, Man U, etc., they have fans literally across the globe from different ethnicities, different cultures, different countries, etc. And so actually having the different types of representation, and as you said, ultimately not for tokenism or box ticking or just putting a woman in or putting a Chinese, black person, whatever in there because it is purely a box ticking exercise, but hearing from someone who is knowledgeable, so hearing from someone who has the opportunity to ultimately be passionate about something of which they are a fan is really, I genuinely think, very, very game changing. And clearly a lot of businesses are adopting this as well, because not only is it the right thing to do, but it is very much about good business and good practice, because it equals good business when we can actually see, potentially people that we affiliate ourselves with or see similarities with, who are represented in those those sports or those businesses. Actually, it's it's touching the customer base and in which the particular sport represents, say.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that it should reflect society, and certainly society, in this country has changed dramatically over the last 20, 25 years. There isn't any doubt about that. And perhaps in the last 5 years or so, that is now being reflected in what we're seeing on the television. Television adverts is an interesting one. Once upon a time, you hardly saw a black face on television advertising. Now you see an awful lot of them, which is really good and reflecting society as it is at the moment. And so that's how it should be.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't just be, a white figure talking about this, that, and the other. People should remember that they're talking to a wide range of people who are now, well, I'm speaking for them, but I now think must feel much more included. And we've seen it interesting in this COVID situation as well. A lot of the experts who are on, a lot of the doctors who work are from the ethnic minorities, and it's good to see that they come on the television and that people can understand how much they are helping in this and how much they are part of society. And I think that's another really good thing as well. Not that I think we should, as I said earlier on, we should have a disaster on our hands for that to be brought home. But it is a side effect, which hopefully, if there is any great side effect to this, that will be one of them.
Absolutely it is. And no, it's great that very much like myself, actually going what you said there, is it's about looking for the silver lining where we possibly can of the cloud, because ultimately we need to try and remain positive for the future generations and ultimately stick together. But you gave some great examples there, and actually it reminds me of speaking with John Dutton the other day, who is the chief exec for the Rugby League World Cup. And again, this is happening not just across football but across other sporting passions as well, which is excellent. And he said to me, Leila, have you ever seen the Rugby League World Cup before, and also what we're doing around the disabled Rugby League World Cup, because literally absolutely everyone is involved. And I went off to kind of go and Google this on YouTube. And I don't know whether you have seen it, but literally absolutely anyone can be involved. You know, those who are partially able, disabled, women. It's you know, it's absolutely incredible to watch. Before.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't. I tell you what I have seen though, which is really good, and that's wheelchair basketball, which is a very exciting game indeed, and almost more so than the real thing, really, because the movement is interesting, and the passing is very good as well. And it was a game I really enjoyed, so that I have done. No, I haven't seen although I'm you know, a rugby league fan. I love rugby league. I haven't seen the Rugby League World Cup, I must admit, but I think a lot of these sports now where there are wheelchair varieties of it, or variations of it, if you like, I think they're really, really good. And again, give people who a few years ago wouldn't have even thought of going outside and playing any kind of sport the opportunity to do so. And again, you know, it's organized, people are recognizing it, and that's fantastic.
But anyhow, a couple of the questions that I had for you, Graham, if you don't mind, and some actually from our advisory board who said to me, wow, you're interviewing Beaky, he is a sporting legend. And I said, well, actually, he's my third cousin. And off I went, going to do Google, as you do, listening to various clips and such like. And I just must absolutely ask you, because there's some really fantastic comments, I have to say, on various threads on the internet saying, Beaky's a legend, having kind of had some on-air arguments with various individuals. I think you called someone out basically, and I listened to it, and there was so many positive comments, really kind of sticking up for you and saying that it was absolutely brilliant hearing you call someone else out who was a bit egotistical and such like. And I just thought that is absolutely brilliant. And you know, I hope also tells a lot about being inclusive and being a good person. Ultimately, I think you know, it's always fun to watch bravado that happens on these various sporting channels, and well, even on other channels, but in particular, you know, calling people out who perhaps are being a little bit, you know, perhaps not so transparent, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one, and of course that went out on air, and it was actually a discussion for somebody who was saying that they had received 5 national awards for their, or something like that, for their broadcasting ability. Turns out he'd received 1 and took part in programs which also received awards, but certainly not in a major role or anything like that. And I was just thinking how many Sony awards I might have got under the same circumstances. So yeah, that was an interesting. You should have heard what happened, by the way, when the microphones were turned off. That discussion did not end. So it was, you know, again, I think people should be fair and honest and reasonable, and I didn't think he was, so, and I was prepared to say so. So there we go.
I have to say, I think that's absolutely hilarious. And it says on Everpedia, if you've ever seen this, that as a result of this, Beecroft gained hero status among sections of Talk Sports listenership. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And, you know, actually talking of awards, before we go into our kind of lightning round and we summarize some of the learning points from today, I wanted to ask you about some of the highlights, I guess, of your career, because you were twice finalist yourself in the category of Sports Broadcaster of the Year in the Sony Awards, and you know, of course, have done lots and lots of things that I'm sure you're immensely proud of.
Yes, as you say, I was twice in the final of the Sony Broadcaster of the Year award, and very pleased indeed. So is my wife, because she went down to London as well and had a rather nice dinner with everybody who was there. So no, it was I've been fortunate, very fortunate indeed, because you know, I've seen Liverpool play in the World Club Championship in Japan. I've seen Liverpool play in finals. I've seen Everton play in finals. I've been to the USA to see boxing in Las Vegas 3 or 4 times world heavyweight boxing title fights. And I've done great things. You know, Aintree is on our doorstep here in Merseyside, and I've been to Aintree and seen that, you know, the world's greatest steeplechase, and reported on that as well. So I've been really, really fortunate to do lots and lots of great things. Boxing is another of my favourite sports, and you know, when the old Liverpool stadium used to exist, you know, I went there on a fairly regular basis to do fight nights there, and some really, really great occasions. But I think what makes a lot of these occasions is not only the massive skill of the athletes, and they are at the top level. You don't realise until you play against them, because when I used to play for the charity football team for the radio stations on a Sunday afternoon, and we used to recruit then. It wouldn't happen these days. We used to recruit some of the ex-pros who were quite happy to turn out for us and have a run round on a Sunday afternoon, which was absolutely brilliant. But you realise that even though they were well past retirement age and you were 30 years younger than them, the ability that you had to be able to control the football and do it, and it just showed you, you know, how they were able to do that as well. And you know, that just shows you that, you know, as you get a little bit older, okay, you may slow down a little bit to a certain extent, but you never lose certain skills and abilities. So again, you know, in overall terms, you know, don't write off, please, in the scramble for everybody to look for young, different people, bright young things in broadcasting. Don't throw away the quality that you have got as well. You've got experience and can speak of that experience, because that's important, I think, to hand down to people.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely could not agree more. And it's another aspect of diversity and inclusion and belonging, is that you know, really wonderful, eclectic melting pot of different people, different experiences, different intergenerational learnings, and everything else that goes with that. So you know, really great point to kind of end on pre moving into just another couple of questions, which we usually call our lightning round, actually, at the end of our podcast. So if you don't mind, I'm going to give you a couple of questions, 30 seconds to answer each one, Beaky. So first of all, what does diversity and inclusion and belonging mean to you personally?
Well, I think it's a difficult one to answer that on a personal level. You know, I just like to see, you know, different people from different walks of life talking on the radio, who have, you know, different ethnic backgrounds, different ethnic experiences. And I feel as though we are all getting drawn together more from that point of view, because the more we understand other people and the more other people are in front of our screens, the more you realise that, in fact, they're awfully like us, in inverted commas, if you understand my meaning there. So I think that's been a massive boost, I think, to making what hopefully will be a much better life for everybody to grow up in.
Great answer. Thanks very much, Beaky. And next, I wonder, who's been the biggest inspiration to you throughout your career, or indeed your life?
Gosh, you know, that's a really good story. One of the people who've helped me an enormous amount is, and you spoke about rugby league before, is Eddie Hemmings. And people who may know rugby league will know that Eddie was a commentator, reporter, did everything basically for Sky on rugby league with his good friend Mike Stevenson, a former international player. And Eddie has helped me an enormous amount. It was him that helped me get a full-time job at Radio Merseyside. It's him that helped to advise me all the way through. But I think if you just look back at the people that you look at and listen to and hear, and pick up bits and pieces from them and understand where they're going, then I think that you know, they're all your heroes, really, because they're your predecessors. And if you can live up to them and to earn a living based on the fact that you are perhaps almost as good as them, then that's not bad, is it?
Absolutely. And what has been, it's another big question, I'm afraid, here, but what would you say has been your secret to success?
My secret success? I suppose it's my enthusiasm. I mean, I go into everything. When I go to a football match now, I get nervous about it, or a big sporting event, I get nervous about it, because I'm really looking forward as a spectator to what's going on. And sometimes it might not help my ability to broadcast, perhaps. But have enthusiasm. If you're going to do a job, have enthusiasm for it. And if you're not enthusiastic about it, then try and find somewhere else in the company where you might be more enthused, or perhaps even think about moving to a different job. It's very important. Being happy at work is one of the most important things there is. If you're not happy at work, then that affects your life without any shadow of a doubt. And I've been really fortunate enough to have found a job where I'm so happy doing it that when I come home, I'm happy as well, and my family may have appreciated that over time.
I'm sure that they have. And finally, before we say goodbye for today, I wonder if you could go back a number of years and give the young Beaky or the young Graham advice. What might you have said to yourself before you embarked on the successful career, when you were kind of back at the Port Sunlight Unilever days, perhaps?
I'd go back to school and say, when you're at school, if you're not sure about anything, ask. If you're at university, if you're not sure about anything, ask. Same applies at work, ask. Ask questions all the time. People expect you to ask questions. And if you go and ask questions and aren't afraid to ask questions, don't think that it's going to be an embarrassment to you. You might feel that way, but at least you will know the answer to those questions, and maybe your colleagues around you or your classmates will know the answer to those questions as well, but we're too frightened to say something. Don't be frightened to speak up. Ask and learn.
Absolutely brilliant advice, and I think something that is applicable to everyone, actually. Education, asking questions, absolutely key. So thank you ever so much, Graham, for being here on the show today with me. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners will have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Pleasure, Leila. Nice to see you as well. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Thank you. By way of summary, as I always do, I think there's been a number of learning points from today speaking with Graham, or Beecroft. For me, a number of the learning points actually have been fascinating when it comes to looking at the last couple of decades of sport and looking at the impact that certain events have actually had on inclusivity and really being able to bring people together. What's been fascinating is the fact that there has been a lot of positive changes within the sport, but also within many other different sports and within other organisations. And it is great to see that actually not only is this more reflective of society, but it is also allowing there to be many positive role models within the media, within sport, that are individuals that many different people can look up to and be able to relate to. And certainly I hear how positive Graham is and enthusiastic about giving back to future generations, certainly his daughters, but also with his lecturing work when it comes to really putting education as the kind of cornerstone to success for our future leaders. And that again certainly really does resonate with me, especially given his advice to really kind of listen, to learn, to embrace everything that you possibly can along life's journey and career's journey. But also, I think very inspirational to learn that actually you really truly can turn something that you are personally passionate in into a genuine career. So those who are listening in, whether it is that you're a massive fan of sport, or whether it is that you have a particular career in mind, something that you particularly love, don't be scared to volunteer or raise your hand above the parapet. Clearly, what Beaky did was actually volunteering. It was unpaid, and look where it has landed him after many successful years now, working within a field that he is passionate about. So again, something that I do believe that we can all learn from, very much so. My name is Leila Mackenzie-Dellis, and you have been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show. We're with you every week, but we're here more frequently at the moment to help support during times of unprecedented change. You can check us out at www.dialglobal.org/podcast. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to the team or myself, and we will put all of the key learning points from the podcast with Beaky into the show notes at the end of today's show. So if you didn't manage to write everything down, or you wanted to re-listen to certain aspects, don't worry, you can do so on demand, and you can check out the key learning points at the end of the show. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms: Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.